She has since been an ROTC Assistant Professor of Aerospace Studies at MIT, served the Department of Defense Joint Services as an Air Force Guard and Reserves member for 10 years at the Pentagon, and also led high-tech startup companies within industry. Her most recent roles include supporting the U.S. Space Force, Rocket Lab, and SpaceX as a communications expert, and is eager to speak to you today about our veterans and our opportunity to be supportive citizens moving forward. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Cromer.
Is it good afternoon or good morning? Still good morning. Whatever I want it to be. Thanks, Todd. Wow. So thank you for being here. And thanks, Thomas Bell. He's a rock star veteran in his own right. I won't embarrass him, but not because you were a Huey pilot back in the Vietnam era, but he also supports and advocates for a number of veteran service organizations. And there's a lot of folks I know that you're out there doing that sort of work, and it's really important to veterans, so thanks, Tom. Much appreciated. And I'd like to thank you all for being here to recognize the contributions of the military veterans, men and women. And even though on Veterans Day, we honor those who are active duty, like my nephew over here going in the Marine Corps. Today I want to talk about, I want to talk about those who've served. I don't care if it's been 6 months, 6 years, or 20 years, or 30 years. I'm not talking about war veterans. Doesn't mean you had to have been in combat. Only 15 to 20% of our military service members are actually in combat. I'm not sure if you knew that. But you served in the military. And I asked myself, why is that important? Why is it worth any attention this Veterans Day? And I'll tell you one thing. There are significant differences between the military and the civilian communities. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we understand it, we can close the gap, close the divide, and truly serve our veterans in ways that can actually utilize the hundreds of veteran service organizations right here in Orange County. And I really didn't understand this until I retired just 6 years ago. For 15 years, I've been supporting veterans in their transition to civilian life, sometimes helping them with their resumes, their interviews, or networking them with job employers. But it wasn't actually till I became a veteran that I realized, wow, this isn't easy. It's not easy at all. And I did a lot of interesting, I thought, pretty amazing things, and it was very difficult. So let me tell you a little about me and my military service. So I grew up in Huntington Beach, Orange County. Don't hold it against me. Went to UC Davis and actually majored, got my BS in meteorology. And when I met George Fishbeck, I don't know if you remember him, the old weatherman, he said, you know, Justine, when you get out of the military, got a weatherwoman job for you. I was like, but I ended up going to boot camp and instead won an award that gave me the opportunity to fly. And so I was on board to fly as a KC-135 navigator. And this was right around the time, I'm sure some of you remember, the Iran-Iraq War. There was actually a point in time when we were allies with Saddam Hussein, until he decided that, maybe I will invade this tiny little place called Kuwait. That didn't go over so well for about 40 nations who realized that, not sure we need Saddam having about 65% of our world's oil supply. Why is oil somehow always in the equation, right? But, so in 1991, the first Gulf War started. And there were a bunch of us 20-somethings who were flying these aircraft. And the KC-135 was absolutely fantastic mission. And if you don't really know it, I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's an air refueling gas station. Nothing moves without an air refueling transport, all right? And I hate to say, you pilots, but the boom operator and the navigator had the best job. Because we had two roles. First of all, the boom operator worked with me as a nav for navigation. we had an INS system, an inertial navigation system, that was kind of like your GPS when it starts to buffer and fades off and you drift. So we had to back it up with celestial, and there were also times we had to go stealth mode anyways and shut everything down. Pilots would come over and rub my shoulders. How you feeling, Nav? Feeling all right. But the boom would step on a step stool, and he'd stick this sextant into a hole the size of an egg, and I'd give him coordinates, and he'd find the star or planet. Hopefully it was the right star. They all kind of looked the same. That was always tricky. And I'd be able to plot our actual location no matter where we were in the world. It was especially helpful when you're across the pond, over the Atlantic Ocean. You know, you don't have a radar target like, hey, there's Vegas, we're on course. But the navigation part was pretty important. It didn't take much to be a degree off course and find yourself 300 miles off course in just a few short hours. But then when it came time to refuel, that was our bread and butter on the KC-135. The boom would run to the back, laying on his stomach, holding a video type game joystick, getting ready to lower the boom to the receiver to give him gas. Upwards of 600 gallons a minute. Not too shabby. But the rendezvous was the coolest part. So essentially we'd have a receiver coming toward us, not dead on, slightly off set, but coming head to head, calculating the closure rate, airspeed. And if you do it just right, I will call the turn to the pilots. And as we turn and roll out, this is really fun at Red Flag. I don't know if you guys know Red Flag, but it's like Top Gun. Super fun in competitions. But if you roll out, that receiver should be right behind you, ready to take a drink. So, super exciting to refuel, but I'll tell you, as a young 20-something, getting ready to participate in the first Gulf War, heading across the Atlantic Ocean, boy, we had bad weather that time. Bad weather the first time around. Huge thunderstorm. And the military is not like the commercial airlines. Okay? They don't divert for weather. Mission is number one. So we're bumping around. Strap down, boys and girls. Strap down, otherwise you're going to hit your head on the ceiling. Boom's in the back. Fighters are ready to take a drink, and they need a drink. You can't have them dropping that aircraft in the water and having our pilots eject. This is mission essential, life essential. So, kind of bouncing around, trying to be patient with the boom. It's called a breakaway. Breakaway, breakaway, breakaway. Okay, that means you got too close. Now that boom, when it's not retracted, it's only about 30 feet long. But when it's retracted, it's only an additional 20 feet. 50 feet long from the aircraft. Two aircraft bouncing around in rain, in the dark, in the middle of the night. It's pretty dangerous. So he calls a breakaway. We climb, receiver takes a dive, come back together, try it again. Just then, lightning hits the nose of our aircraft. And I just see out of the corner of my eye, it looked like just this bright light just shot through down the center of the aircraft. It's like, okay, boom, how you doing? We gotta hurry up here. Gotta get out of this weather. The boom was able to make contact, refuel the aircraft. They were super happy. You should see it when you refuel Thunderbirds. They actually do a show for you. They love it so much. Super exciting job to, even over in the Gulf War, we flew over the no-fly zone, northern part of Iraq. Missiles are hot, just circling, feeding C-130s and fighter aircraft. And it was an interesting time then because a few times I got an opportunity to fly with an all-female crew. And I'm sorry, guys, but women can really grease a landing. Okay? They do. It's like, do we land? It's pretty amazing. Great touch. But even with that all-female crew back in 1991, we did not receive credits for flying to get an air medal. We did eventually, a few years later. There was a congresswoman that came over and said, hey, you gals can now get points for your sorties in combat. It's like, well, okay, by now we got a mission to go fly. But, we were there to do the work no matter what. And so it's great now that women can earn air medals for these combat missions that they fly just as well and with the men as a team. So it was an amazing time of 6 years, but then I got out because I wanted to start a family. I was deploying 10 months out of every year. I had 2 young boys. One of them sitting over here, he's a rock star. Got out, decided to get into the whole .com high-tech startup stuff. Did that for a little while, but when the Afghan war started, it was time to go back. Didn't want to deploy, but I had a great opportunity to go teach ROTC at MIT. And for some of you out there who are Vietnam vets, it was really odd to hear a phrase I hadn't heard in a really long time. With the Vietnam veterans, with all the political activity going on and name calling, you know what I'm talking about, being called baby killers. I had cadets who were students. Okay, we're talking students at MIT, Harvard, Tufts, and Wellesley in Detachment 365 Doolittle Raiders. And they were being called baby killers. Our detachment was getting bomb threats. Students were crying, coming into my office. The parents wanted them to quit the program. These students, many of them on scholarship, if they quit the program, they would be out of school. For what? They were learning leadership and ethics. They were pimple-faced, eating cup of noodles, just studying 24 hours a day. They couldn't even march. And I actually have a story for you about this one. This guy, Paul, I said, Paul, he was a Harvard student majoring in government. And I said, Paul, you gotta figure out how to march. You gotta get this march thing. And I love a parade. And I love drill. So I said, come over to the detachment. So he comes over to the detachment, and I said, okay, just walk. Just walk for me. Just walk normal. You see how that works, right? It's like... But then something would happen when I'd call the command, and I'd go, shut! Hey! Forward, march! What's that? He's like, I don't know. So I said, okay, just walk again. And he walked. That's all you're doing. So I said, let's try that again. Catch up. Yep. Hey. Forward. Hot. Why are your arms stuck to your legs? It's like, I don't know. 2 things. He learned to march. He took my advice, applied for pilot school, got in, became a test pilot. So much for that government major. And as far as the threats, we worked in a 360 environment with faculty, staff, students, the media. We talked about what these students are doing, who they are, and put a face to what's going on here. The name calling, it's cowardice. And I kid you not, within a year and a half, we had harmony between all 4 schools. It took the presidents of all 4 schools to get this done. But when you focus and you address the problem quickly, nip it in the bud, bring everybody together in the same room to have a dialogue and a narrative, you can solve some of these problems or concerns, fears. And all the students stayed in the program. They ended up going into the military and graduating, so that was fantastic. Wow, we got a flyby. That's impressive. So, after MIT, I go to the Pentagon for 9 years. It was fabulous. Did so many different things with the National Guard Bureau, with the Air Force Reserves, with the regular Air Force. Had an opportunity to sell our jets. I don't know if you know what the boneyard is, but when we don't need our jets anymore, we typically try and give them to our strategic allies. I was responsible for 7 countries in Southeast Asia, and it was fabulous. My kids called me a legalized arm dealer for the Pentagon. It was pretty cool. So I get out, come home. I'm all excited, full of confidence. Started up a nonprofit, woman, minority, veteran-owned nonprofit in the field of urban sustainability. Woo. Hire veterans, serve veterans. 18 months later, I was broke, used up all my savings, was unemployed, and my resume, I couldn't even get a first look at it at an aerospace company. What in the world is going on? Then I come to find out a lot of my peers are going through the same thing. It's like, how can this be? I mean, it's such an amazing group of people. What's going on here? Where's this disconnect? So let me tell you a little bit of something about the active duty military service members. One, there are extreme barriers to entry. Drug tests, fitness tests, written tests, background checks, criminal checks. Back then you couldn't have a tattoo showing or a mustache. All kinds of clearances, depending on what your specialty might be. They could be interviewing your family and your friends for months on end, if you needed a secret clearance, for instance. Then there's a rigor of training. Everybody goes through boot camp, and those of you who know, you remember even the Vietnam guys. Are you kidding me? They had to go to the jungle in Asia for their training. We were just up there in the Washington National Forest. And depending on what you were going in there, would also determine the type of training you would have. My nephew here just had 3 months of boot camp. He probably already has tinnitus because of all the yelling in his ear. As a flyer, I went through land survival, water survival, escape and evasion within the survival school program, as well as POW camp. That was interesting when you talk about just a very, very small percentage of women in the military at that time. And it's critical. If you end up in a POW camp with a woman and a group of men and they're all your buddies, boy, it's tough for the guys. That's really tough. So it was a great experience, great training to go through that. But even after that, there's such extreme responsibility. There are 20-year-olds out there who are responsible for millions of dollars of equipment, whether it's an aircraft or a tank or whatever it might be. They're leading teams of 5, 10, 15 people. It's a myth to say that veterans only take orders. They're leaders, and they're leaders at very, very young ages. And then whether you deployed or not, many do deploy. And there's an intensity associated with that. It's not just being gone for 10 months, it's being gone for 10 months every single year. Away from your family, away from the holidays. But you're building up this strength, this will, this pride. It's not beating you down, it's making you stronger. And then of course, you look all across the services and we all have this common culture of integrity. Doing what's right when no one's looking. Loyalty, not ratting out on your teammates, but working it out, problem solving, sitting down and having a conversation. Teamwork, whether it's a hard crew, people you've worked for or with all the time and you know them well, to a soft crew, new team members coming in, more communications required, but get the mission done. Don't let it slow you down. And to what end? All of this. To serve our nation's national security interests, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States 24/7, 365 days a year. It's admirable. It's an amazing group of people. So what happens when we come home? Right? We come home, they have these hopes and aspirations, talents, skills, advanced training, advanced education, and sit or stand behind a counter for a for-profit company? What's for-profit? What does that mean? What's the mission? To potentially work in a work environment that may be undisciplined, or maybe doesn't provide the feedback and performance review so that I can get promoted. Give me a performance review. I'm doing a great job. Veterans suffer more so compared to non-veterans when it comes to promotability. Just give me a second. And what happened to all that continuous training? I I know a lot of you feel that way. In whatever you do, give me the training. I want the expertise. I want to get better. And then, of course, what we always take for granted, the 100% medical and dental and housing allowance. It's tax-free. Don't have that when you get out. Even when I retired as an Air Force Reserves after 20 years, but that doesn't guarantee me a retirement until I hit 60. And then there are some instances where you can get a little early. But it's a myth to think that just because you're retired, you're getting all these benefits. No, you just got out. So the result, sadly, here in Orange County, and even nationwide, when our veterans are getting out of the service, even when they're retiring or getting out after 2 years, 6 years, 10 years, about 65% are unemployed. And in my opinion, what's worse, the majority of them are underemployed. Their skills, talents, knowledge are being underutilized. And you've all felt that. You've been in a job with the brain fog. Well, why am I here? What am I doing? Am I wasting my time? I need to get into something else. But can you imagine from a military person who's been focused on a mission with an operational mindset, being in a situation like this? These are gaps that we can resolve. The last thing we want to do is have our veterans feel like foreigners in their own homeland. And we can bring them closer. And there's so many ways that we can do that. And I'll tell you about one of the silver linings here, and Tom Bell is part of this. As I mentioned earlier, there's over 100 organizations here in Orange County serving veterans. These are business leaders, volunteers, from the Tierney Center in Tustin to UCI's Orange County Veterans and Military Family Collaborative, with 11 working groups. And they meet all the time, and they're working all the time while they're doing their day jobs to support veterans with legal assistance, military family and children, education, employment, housing. There's teams that go out and get the funding from amazing philanthropists and donors and corporate donors right here in Orange County to support veterans. They're out there, but you've got to get to them. I didn't know about them. I wouldn't have known that these organizations existed if I hadn't taken my father in to get his service-connected rating. I had no idea these services were out there. To include, if you want to be an entrepreneur, as it's well known that veterans are amazing entrepreneurs. They have innovation, spirit, creativity, and they hustle. So I challenge you. First of all, for those of you who are not veterans, if you know someone's getting out of the service, perhaps a family, friend member, or someone in your family, reach out before they get out and say, what's going on with your transition program? Because I'll tell you, the transition assistance program, I worked on it from the Pentagon, it's not good. It hasn't been good. Okay, they're not congressionally mandated to take care of you once you're out. It's kind of like going to the university. You get a letter in the mail, right, saying, can you donate $50 as an alumni? But they're not responsible for finding you a job, taking care of you. But there are groups that do that, and the VA, the state, the county, and the federal government are there to support. And there's a lot of funds that don't end up being taken. So ask those questions before a service member gets out. If they're already out, ask them how they're doing. Have you signed up for your vet card? Do you know that you have veteran benefits? Don't be ashamed. They're there for you, waiting for you, and they're amazing. And they keep getting better all the time. If you're an employer, take a look at your veteran program. And that's not just serving cake on Veterans Day. There are specific needs that aren't that difficult. There's literally standard operating guides on how to really relate to your veterans and make it special. And I promise you, they will do amazing work for you if you put that investment into them. And if anything, whether they're young or old, ask them to tell their stories. They have so many amazing stories. They really do. A lot of them they'll just talk amongst themselves, but why don't you go and ask? Auntie, why did you join the military? What did you do? And whether you were deployed or in combat or not in combat or sitting behind a desk, you were essential. When I was flying in the Air Force, only 7% of us, of the entire Air Force, were actual aviators. The other 93% essential for us to fly, fight, and win. They have stories. They have all kinds of stories. And if you're a veteran, self-identify. It's okay. There are people and programs here to embrace you. You can join an American Legion. There's many and they're very active. There's new members all the time of all ages. But especially be proud as a veteran. You're unique. There's nobody like you and no one who will ever, ever be like you. We know you're vulnerable, but you're also confident. We know in some ways maybe you're invisible. But you are giving, you are humble, you are strong, you are loyal, and you have integrity. And everybody around you and all the young people and anybody else need to see that and know that you're a veteran and you bring that to the table. So overall, as Todd Spitzer said, God bless our active duty service members. There's only 1 million of them out there out of 330 million US folks. And it's the smallest Air Force ever supporting this country. God bless our veterans, and God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm going to break for a second. As you saw,